So, Red Bull have a problem, and it's Sergio Perez. We're a third of the way through the 2024 Formula 1 season, and while one Red Bull driver is up the front, winning races and taking names, the other is struggling badly to just finish on the podium. While one driver has taken the lion's share of pole positions so far this year, the other is being out-qualified by Logan freaking Sargent. While one driver is extracting the absolute most out of a car that may not be as good as we initially thought it was, the other just can't seem to cope. And yet, Sergio Perez will remain at Red Bull Racing for at least another year beyond this, perhaps even longer. And that presents a dilemma, but not necessarily for the reasons that you might be thinking of. Okay, time to stop beating around the bush. Let's get down to the nitty-gritty here. So, a quick recap before we begin, since we all seem to have selective memory in the sport. By 2020, Red Bull's driver lineup was in disarray. There was no question about how good Max Verstappen was, but everyone was questioning the status of the team's second driver, Alex Albon. The spins, the mistakes, the being raced so hard moments. Every bit of chance was afforded to Albon to improve his racecraft over the year, but it just never came to much of anything. Now, whether that was down to his inability to grasp the car's handling characteristics or some kind of voodoo doll curse or whatever, as the end of 2020 drew nigh, they knew they needed to provide Max with a suitable teammate in the event they may be able to take the fight to the empire of Mercedes. And as it so happens, they found their answer. Perez's run in the Force India Racing Team Point Stroll team in the latter half of 2020 was spellbinding, genuinely amazing drives from a dude who just a couple of months ago was essentially sacked thanks to that most wonderful of things that social scientists call nepotism. Even if Sir Lancelot did hit his annual 4 to 5 good races run, the notion that Checo could be out of a drive for 2021 just seemed criminal. Everyone hated it. Everyone felt awful for him. And then, Sakir happened. After almost 10 years of trying, 10 years of being in mid-cars that were barely worthy of the podiums that he scored them in, he was finally atop the podium as a Grand Prix winner. Now, I know I say I don't have favorites, but I was and am a Checo fan. And this was a moment that all of us Checo fans savored at the time. His prospects for getting onto the grid for 2021 weren't all that great at the time, but to get a win before the time was up, and to do it in that fashion, to come from last in the field, to climb up and win the race like that, at least we could be at peace with that, if this really were to be the end of Checo's time in Formula 1. But then, a couple of weeks later, he was snapped up by Red Bull to replace the drowning Albon. He would live to fight another day in this whimsical wandorium known as Formula 1. But you know, despite signing with a big dog team with a massive amount of potential to bring Checo more wins and more successes, he still brought with him a wealth of sponsors that included the backing of Carlos Slim, one of the richest people in the world and someone who had backed him from the very start. Now, if there's a sponsor that you would ever feel secure with, it might be him. And Surfshark VPN, who is, as you might have ascertained by now, the sponsor of this video. Hold on, stay here please. I know y'all know what a VPN is. I know most of us are partially educated, but just quickly for those who don't know, a VPN is a service that protects your information by encrypting all the data that you send through the internet, thereby protecting said data and keeping any minuses from getting at it. And as our parents always say, always use protection. On the internet. We don't want our stuff being compromised, and in an age where everyone is an introvert, privacy is our most valued asset, given the upper 1% has priced us out of everything else. We love to just kick back and forget our troubles with a nice dose of streaming, but even that's a headache sometimes, given they love to limit the content based on your location, which honestly doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense to me. Or anyone. But with Surfshark, you can change your location, at least virtually, and thus gain access to content otherwise not available in your region. I mean, it ain't quite teleportation, but it is about as close as we're gonna get right now. Sound good? Well, secure your privacy with Surfshark. Enter coupon code JoshRavel for an extra 4 months free with your subscription. So for around about a couple of bucks a month, when all is said and done, you are fully protected. And with those 4 free months and a 30-day money-back guarantee, I have to ask, what the bloody hell are you waiting for? Oh, right. That. Well, okay. The choice to put Checo into that second Red Bull seat paid dividends throughout 2021. Multiple times, the Mexican Minister of Defense was able to take the fight to Mercedes and held his own when it mattered. No one really expected him to beat Max, apart from maybe the delightful Papa Perez, but the job he carried out merited his place within the team, at least as much as can be expected of a first-year driver. But for 2022, it was expected to be a bit different, given now he was well-versed in the team and was familiar with the equipment. He himself saying that he would be much closer to to Max that year, and in the first few rounds this certainly proved to be the case. He took pole position in Jeddah, for example, and won the illustrious Monaco Grand Prix. The objective of being an effective second driver for Red Bull was being fulfilled from Checo, but as the season progressed, he gradually began to fade away. And despite the speed of the RB18 that year, he still managed to lose second in the standings to Charles Leclerc, who was driving a Ferrari that struggled to grasp the concept of staying alive. When the next season started, however, it appeared that Checo may have turned a corner. He won in Jeddah and then in Baku, and for a while, it looked like he might have been able to pose a genuine threat for the title, or at least that's what the media was having us believe at the time. It certainly didn't matter too much to Red Bull to have both their drivers fighting each other, given their opposition was so far behind them. But after losing the Miami Grand Prix to Max, that's when everything started to go downhill. A myriad of mistakes tainted his championship hopes, which included crashing the car, getting knocked out early in qualifying, or whatever. By Hungary, he had not been in Q3 for 5 consecutive Grand Prix, and he celebrated this milestone by slamming his car into the barrier within the first 10 minutes of practice. And it really didn't help that Daniel Ricciardo was being drafted back into a full-time F1 seat over at AlphaTauri as a sort of tryout to see if he still had some piss and vinegar in them Aussie veins. It never got much better as the season went on, and was being lambasted for his poor performances, while other drivers in the Red Bull family were doing bits. I mean, Ricciardo outqualified Checo at Checo's home race. That kind of said everything at the time. Red Bull went on public record saying that Checo desperately needed to find his form, lest he wants a one-way ticket to the glue factory. Yet, somehow, Checo managed to hang on to second place in the championship that year, an indication of just how insane that RB19 was. But that did beg the question, what happens when that advantage starts to go away? 9 rounds into the 2024 season, it's safe to say that Checo's year thus far has been not great, to put it nicely. Initially, it didn't look to be too bad. The results were kind of average, but he was working as an effective backup man for Max, grabbing podiums in 4 out of the first 5 races. But his struggles to move up the field in Melbourne were kind of disconcerting, and then that's when the real problems started to surface. He almost obliterated Max at the first corner in Miami, and lost out to both Ferraris afterwards. At Imola, he was miles off Max's pace, and ended up finishing almost a minute behind him in the race, in 8th place, with a crash in final practice and mistakes blighting his race. This was all starting to trend in a very concerning pattern. In Monaco, he suffered the indignity of being knocked out in Q1 and being outqualified by Logan Sargent. That's gotta hurt. And then his race ended after only a few hundred yards, thanks to Kevin Magnussen throwing him into the barriers. But again, we gotta ask, why was he even there in the first place? At the back of the grid, in a Red Bull? I mean, I'll believe a polar bear in Arlington, Texas, but this is just taking the piss. Then we reached Canada, and Checo finally hit upon a run of consistency. Consistently getting knocked out in Q1, again. Being outqualified by Logan Sargent, again. He made little progress in the race, even being passed by the Alpine of Esteban Ocon, before dimly deciding to hurl his car into the barrier backwards and convert his RB20 into a Formula Ford. And yet, despite this run of wretched results, and despite Red Bull admitting that he needs to regain the form that he's obviously lost, he has been given a contract extension for at least another year, potentially 2, depending upon which journalists have better contacts. Now, I've gotta ask, why the heck would they opt for this? Even with those few races that he won since joining the team, other Red Bull drivers have been fired for better results in a far shorter time span. So why is Checo getting a free pass here? I mean, it's almost as if there's external factors at play here, almost as if he's bringing in a boatload of cash or something. Oh, I get it. It is a bit hard to ignore just how much money Checo brings to the brand, whether it be through personal sponsors or the obscene amounts of merch and product currently being sold in Mexico. It may not be the sole reason why they'd re-sign him, but that influx of cash should be really hard to pass up for anyone, even a team as big as Red Bull are. And that's not necessarily a slight at him. You gotta get ahead however you can in the sport. That's why the Honey Badger is still around, despite displaying the driving aptitude this year of a sloth in a vat of glue. Actually, on that note, what about the other drivers in the Red Bull family? Why would they not up for consideration? We know just how good Yuki Tsunoda has been. He's more than deserved at least consideration for the seat, but as far as we can work out, he's not being considered for it. It's almost as if Red Bull look at him as if to say, wow, you earn well, you look after yourself, you have no mortgage, your future is settled, you donate to the poor. Oh no, wait, sorry, you're 4'11". So on the performance front, it doesn't make a lick of sense. At the same time, going up against Max Verstappen as a teammate is a whole different kettle of fish. We have seen that from other drivers in the past, but with all due respect, because I like him, I mean, who doesn't? I definitely don't see Yuki being any different to Albon, to Gasly, or Checo in this regard. What's more, with Yuki being backed heavily by Honda, there may be alternative plans for him that lay beyond Red Bull. Potentially. Daniel Ricciardo, meanwhile, can definitely go to war in the battle of psychological combat, but he ain't the same dog that he was from circa 2014 to 2018. He'd like to say that he is, but my brother in Christ, 1 or 2 good races a year doesn't make you a commodity. It makes you Lance Stroll. And yeah, you've got the likes of Liam Lawson and Isaac Hadjar there, drivers who have definitely got what it takes for Formula 1. Or if you want to go beyond the realms of the Red Bull program, you could lure a top driver away from a rival to fill the void. But we do have to remind ourselves that they have done that before. And that's why we're here today. After Ricciardo left the team at the end of 2018, Pierre Gasly was drafted in after a very impressive stint at Toro Rosso. Everyone was hyped for him, but after only half a season, his campaign crashed and burned into the ground. He was demoted back to Toro Rosso, and in his place came another Red Bull Jr. in the form of Alex Albon. And no, it wasn't enough time, and was there perhaps influence given Red Bull's Thailand origins? I mean, hey, look, anything is possible, but either way, despite some early promise, Albon's campaign also fell apart, while Red Bull desperately attempted to bring his form back into line, and it ultimately led us to where we are today, where we're questioning why the hell Red Bull are hanging on to Checo, ignoring the fact that at the time of Albon's struggles, everyone was practically crying out for the Racing Point driver to be hired by Red Bull by virtue of his amazing 2020 season. To say that he did not deserve his promotion is asinine. To try and diminish how good his year was is equally as foolish. We as a community are so freaking fickle, and we can't seem to make our minds up. Just like in Yuki Tsunoda's debut season. First race in, he's the greatest rookie in years. 4 or 5 races later, he's all of a sudden been promoted too early to Formula 1. What is it, ladies and gentlemen? Let's pick our poison here. But with Sergio Perez, we are in year 4 of the experiment, and the results are only getting worse. This shouldn't be happening. Now there's a legitimate cause for calling his place into question. It almost seems as if he's a newer version of Giancarlo Fisichella, amazing in mid cars and mid in amazing cars. There's also another aspect of this. It is clear that Checo will never be able to fight Max for the title. As good as Checo is, and it may not end up being entirely up to him, he's not gonna hound and take points off of Max like some of the other driver lineups would. But that's not necessarily a bad thing for Red Bull. To have a distinct number 1 and number 2 driver running the team like a pure dictatorship can yield a lot of good results, a la Ferrari in the early 2000s. Making your star driver comfortable in this regard, knowing he'll be pampered like a pharaoh, could be a good thing, but there is another side to that coin. When the competition catches up, and it will happen, if Checo continues to drown like Tommy Vercetti, will that cost them the Constructors' Championship, and potentially the Drivers' one too? Will that rear gunner you banked on not be there when Max needs it most? Exactly how much do you risk compromising the championship because you fall back on what you know and feel safe with, rather than making tough calls in anticipation for what lies ahead? Having said that, if Checo isn't the guy for the job, who is? And don't just say anyone, because that's not a proper answer. Who could cope with a car that may handle like a raccoon on angel dust? Who is on Max's level that could cope with the pressure, challenge him for the title, and in the process, not throw each other off the road? The answer may not be as easy as some of y'all think. And even if Red Bull could find that driver, is that really what the team wants? Yeah, sure, we fans want closer competition, but keeping the status quo, a star driver backed up by a solid second driver, is selfishly more preferable for them. Now, Checo can be that second driver that Red Bull wants. He has shown that before, but it's not happening often enough. The mistakes and the pace discrepancy is coming at a time where they really don't need it, and it's not a new thing either. Red Bull have a problem, and it's Sergio Perez. And I don't know if they can fix it. Max's performances are masking the fact that the field is drawing closer and closer, and with the new regulations coming in 2026, it's a complete unknown if Red Bull will be the powerhouse that they've been these last few years. They are going to need to make sure that their driver lineup is the right one heading into that era, but truth be told, they haven't really had that for years, and changing Checo could be a complete 50-50 call. For Red Bull, it really is a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Or maybe not, for I think I know a driver that will be the answer to all of Red Bull's prayers.